Before we design, I want to talk about the principles of graphics design. Now, where elements are the ingredients, the principles of graphics design are the recipe, or more like seed, like the guide. They tell you what proportions or in what quantity or in what measure to put maybe your ingredients for your food. So this is just the recipes. They are actually guides to help you to know to what extent can you use each and every of these elements. To what extent can you use the elements of graphic design to achieve your desired aim or your desired objective. So with that said, we want to look at some of the principles of graphics design. We want to look at very few of them that are very important for you to know. The first one being contrast. Now, what is contrast? Contrast involves making elements stand out from each other. Now, the principle of contrast actually states that when two or more elements are different from each other, you should make them distinctively different. You should make them distinctively different. For example, elements like text and images, you should make those images to be different. And now it cuts across all the elements. It applies to all the elements. Maybe you're trying to use colors. You should make those colors stand out. Let me further explain by using visuals because this is a visual class. So you look at this image. This was done by Apple when they launched out their new iPod. I could see this. The background there, they're using colors and images. Okay, how about if the image of the girl who's enjoying the music was also the same color the background? You see, those are two elements. So the principle of contrast actually states that when two or more elements are different from each other, you should make them distinctively different so that they could pop out. And you can see how the pod just showcases, just pops out of the entire design because it's different from everything trying to communicate. You can see the text, which is the iPod and logo, trying to pop out from the color of the background. What if they were same color? Would you be able to identify anything? So that's the principle of contrast, to make elements that are different from each other to stand out and to make them distinctively different. Now let's consider something else. The idea of contrast is to make elements to pop out of you. You make elements to be noticeable. The notoriety, you make it easy. You want the user to observe and understand. You want the element to stand out. Say the shade of the black background of the bottle was the same shade with the white background that you're seeing here. What would it be? It will not be anything. So the principle of contrast is really designed to make images or to make things to be noticeable to the end user. And that is very important. So when you're using the elements, you should also try as much as possible to try to communicate to the end users which elements are important, which elements are less important, and which elements are least important, and to also show them with ease what elements they should take notice of and what elements not to take notice of. So that guides you so that you can achieve effective communication with the smallest amount of time possible. So make things pop, and that is the principle of contrast. Contrast helps you to make things pop out at the end user rather than just making things blend. So they can be able to take notice and take action as much as possible, or take action as quick as possible. Now let's look at the second principle, which is repetition. Now what is repetition? This principle involves using the same effects for elements that mean or say the same thing. It allows the user to clearly identify which elements go together to aid effective communication. So I'm going to just show you the picture so I could explain what it is, because try to break this sentence down might take you a lot. But since this is a visual class, I like to do it visually. So this is what repetition has to do with. It's like you apply the same effect for elements that mean or say the same thing. So it also helps you identify which elements go together or which elements try to stand out. So take for example this picture. You can see that the circles at the background, they really don't say much. You can see that repetition in terms of colors is used for the circles behind the girl and even on the cloth. It's just trying to showcase that it's all one and the same thing. And you can see repetition in terms of size, in terms of colors. They all mean and say the same thing, which is trying to promote a particular brand or trying to promote a particular culture of energy, of fun, of excitement. just trying to use textures and patterns to actually blend into these things. So that's what it is. And then I want to say that brands today actually use repetition to enhance their communication and to enhance their values and what they stand for. Since graphics design has to do with effective communication, you won't want to say one thing today and then say another thing tomorrow. No, that is not good for business. So as such, brands like Apple, Coca-Cola, Facebook, they are really consistent with the colors, with the text, the images, forms that they use so that they can be able to sound consistent to their end user. And that consistency builds trust and in turn builds brand loyalty. So even when you're designing, you realize that if this thing can affect business, how much more what it is that you have to say. So you have to be consistent and you have to repeat some things. Maybe you can repeat in colors, maybe you can repeat in text for elements that mean or say the same thing. As soon as you want to say and you think that they are actually saying the same thing or they are in the same class, you should actually use repetition principle for these things. Another principle I want to tell you is alignment. And what does alignment mean? This means creating seamless visual connection with design elements. It also means giving an ordered appearance to elements of a design to enhance ease of communication. So it's very easy for you to understand that the principle of alignment has to do with making seamless visual connection. The principle of alignment exists to allow you for ease of communication, to enhance ease of communication. So if we look at this definition right now, it means ordered appearance. So if your design were to be so scattered abroad, it would be hard for the user to understand what it is you're trying to say. So the principle of alignment also says that you should try as much as possible to stick to one form of alignment. Okay, if you use one alignment, use that alignment from the beginning of your design to the end. Of course, yeah, there are exceptions to the rules, but you should have a reason to break these rules. Like I said, when starting out, these principles are just to guide you. It doesn't mean that you can break them, but you have to have a reason before you break these principles. And as you can see in this clear example, you can see that this is an example of alignment where you see the main text wherever you go becomes a part of you somehow, aligns with the name of the person who wrote the code, and it just blends. It allows it ease of read for the end user. So the design is not scattered. You're not seeing wherever you go except for some reasons. But you have to be careful when starting designing so that you could see how design influences. But because you design it more than you're designing it for the end user. So you have to be careful when playing with this principle. So stick to alignment because it helps you create order within your design. So for ease of read and for ease of effective communication. The next principle I want to talk about is proximity. Now, what is proximity? This entails the nearness of elements to each other, especially for elements that mean or say the same thing. It is used when elements relate to each other. It answers the question of after this, what next? So when you want to relate elements that go together, when you want to emphasize relationship, nearness, these things, they go together, they relate together, you use what? Proximity to showcase that. I want you to imagine maybe your classroom when you were kindergarten and your teacher came and said, girls, stand one side, boys, stand one side. That is a clear example of proximity is because the boys, they relate to each other, they mean the same thing. So elements that mean or say the same thing, you actually apply the principle of proximity to it. Now this might seem like a lot, but when we get started, you're going to understand what it is that I'm trying to communicate to you effectively when you get to apply all these things. So this is example of what we say. Like I said, this is a visual class. So you see that sometimes information are really scattered, but to have that, make that information have real meaning, you have to also apply the principle of proximity, where they're not just scattering objects or scattering elements about, but you categorize elements in a way that you can actually effectively communicate. So see, just like the example of the classroom when I talked about the boys and the girls. So you can see this. So all these things are done to create order, to create meaning to your design. So take a look at this. You can see if it's for a typical website, you can see that the menus, they go together. And other aspects of the design, they go together because they do what? They mean or say the same thing. Now, we've been talking about a lot of maybe visual elements, but I'm telling you that it cuts across anything that you want to do. So anytime you understand that elements mean or say the same thing. So you see in this website actually that it was not by coincidence that they're trying to put the menus together so that it can be easy for the user to understand the functionality of any of the elements that you are actually providing. So looking at this again, you can see the principle of proximity, where you see that the website and the details, they go together. You can see that quick takeaways go together, which is the music festival and the date. So if you're not interested in music festival, you might as well just focus on something else. And the DJ names, you see that they go together, as well as the ticket and some of the benefits for the ticket, they go together. So this is just an example. Like I said, in real life application, you're going to see how these things play a significant role in achieving effective visual communication. But for now, these are just the principles to guide you very quickly to understand what it is. Yes, although principles are a lot, sometimes when teaching, I like to break things into sections so you could understand what it is. And for me, the first four that I just told you, I usually call it the CRAP principle of design, where it talks about contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. That's the easiest way to understand. In fact, when I got started, this was the easiest way I was able to capture some of the principles to inform my design decisions. Additionally, another mnemonics I want to show you is called the ABCDEH method. And now, look, principles are a lot, but these are by far the basics in which you're going to be using it every time. So, the A stands for alignment, the B, which is in this case, stands for balance, the C, contrast, the D, it stands for distance, which is proximity, and the E stands for repetition, kind of the E when you balance and when you play with it. But then we want to talk about balance in this context. And what's balance? Balance is a way visual elements are arranged so that their visual weight harmonizes with the other elements in the design. Now I'm going to explain. When I talk about visual weight harmonizes, now you don't want your design to be very chaotic, and some aspects are more dense than the others, so everyone is focused. You want everything to be evenly distributed so that the end user can consume or digest the information with the least amount of resistance as possible to his visual brain, because what? Humans, they don't like stress. So that's why trying to speak language, sometimes it stresses someone. Has someone tried communicating you with a very strange language? You find it very, very weird. But if they brought about pictures, you would really understand and buy into the idea. But guess what? You want the person to be able to present this information in a way that you can have the overall idea and not miss out on any information. So this is where visual balance comes into play. And for example, look at this. This is just a book, and this is a clean example of balance is. You don't want any aspects to be more dense than the other. You have to evenly distribute the visual weight of your design. And I want to see like this yin and yang stuff. So for every plus, you have to also balance it with a minus so it could work out effectively. And you have to know how to break parts and pieces together so everything is evenly distributed on your page. So this is also an example of balance in terms of color. I also want you to see it as a water splash or water bubble, where you have a big bubble and the other aspect has some small bubble. And the intensity at which the small bubble has to come together to actually balance out the bigger bubble is some kind of yin and yang and some kind of balance strategy that you have to use. So you would have to create emphasis on some important things, and you have to also make sure that the other smaller or less important things are also evenly distributed so it can be cohesive. So when we talk about balance, we talk about cohesiveness, part of design where everything feels together. And some aspects are not just too dense more than other aspects of your design. So these are all principles that in the course of application, you really understand how these things work. The next thing I want to talk about is the H, which is the hierarchy. I know some of you might have said, what's the H? Actually, H stands for hierarchy. And this means the arrangement of elements in order of perceived importance. Now, I've talked about more important, less important, and least importance. Well, the concept of hierarchy actually helps you to do this. So let's look at this picture. Of course, you could see that this actually works for text, and you could see it also play right there in the website, where you could see the curated playlist. It has more visual emphasis more than the A-list rock. So the idea is that you have to position information on your design in order of more important, less important, and least important. So you always want your user to see, oh, this is more important, or this is less important, or this is the least important. And you can see all those things play. And with this, it helps your design feel uniform, it helps your design feel balanced, and helps your design achieve a more effective communication. So this is another way, which is a live application, live use case. So where they try to balance, because if everything is just the same size, it doesn't really make sense. You can't really take a lot out of it. And the human attention span right now has been shrunk to 7 to 8 seconds, which is smaller than that of a dolphin. So that means we are really distracted, and you want to present information in a way that is easy for your end user to understand. So with this, if I take on Summer Sound Festival 2016, and if I'm interested in summer sound or interested in sound, I can dig deeper to find out who will be attending. If I'm not, I could pass on. So don't really waste time. So this helps you attract your target audience with ease. Now I find necessary to talk about a few things in parsing. And first is the rule of third. Now what is the rule of third? Well, the rule of third actually was developed by designers, which involves dividing maybe your design into 3 equal parts, or your design spacing into 3 equal parts, and you position elements at areas where some of the lines intersect for visual emphasis, okay, for prominence purposes and for ease of digestion. So it is seen that positioning images like this makes it to look visually appealing. That's the end user can easily read and extract information as easily as possible. So sometimes you have to position important information at the point where 2 lines intersect, or maybe half of the space. As you can see, that's how it is done. So this is just a clear example of a rule of third. And in other subsequent practical classes, I'm going to actually explain how this rule of third works and how it informs some of the design decisions that you'll be making. The next thing I want to talk about has to do with typography, why I say in this picture that fonts matter. So you can imagine if someone wrote to a letter using the second handwriting, you'll be like, whoa! You wouldn't want to respond to that. So actually, fonts have been discovered to communicate effectively to the end user in a particular tone of voice. Fonts have a humane spirit to things. So you have to be careful when you're choosing fonts. Talking about fonts, I want to just talk to you that there are about 4 basic types of fonts. Number 1, we have serif font. By serif, we mean that fonts that have little extensions called serif tied to the end of the terminals, while the sans serif means no extensions tied to this font. Now the serif and the sans serif, they have context in which they are being used. The serif is actually used when trying to communicate the sense of elegance in anything, while the sans serif is a more modern kind of typeface. The script also actually does that, so you see that it has some flowy connectors to it, which makes it look like the script or the handwriting kind of font. The decorative actually is used for specific purposes and for specific contexts. So with all this should inform you when you're playing with text and type. You know, we're going to deal into those fonts in great detail when we eventually begin our design. Now, finally, I want to talk about file types very quickly. And the first file type that you might likely encounter is called the JPEG. The JPEG stands for Joint Photographic and Engineering Group, while the PNG stands for the Portable Network Graphics, while the GIF stands for Graphic Interchange Format, and the SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. Now, all this has some advantages and disadvantages in that while the JPEG is just a picture format, the PNG is a picture format with a transparent background, so it has ability to showcase some level of transparency in it. While the GIF stands for Graphics Interchange Format, where you talk about combining 2 or more images interacting carefully with each other, while the SVG actually talks about an environment in which a specific, especially for web, an environment mostly for web in which a particular file can be used. The other file extensions that we could have is PSD, which is Photoshop document, EPS, which is electronic PostScript, and TIF, which is tag image file format, and the PDF, which is portable document format. Now, all these files, except from the PDF, are always sent to the end user for the purpose of re-editing the original piece of art, while the PDF, where it is used for ease of transfer of the entire information in one piece of art. With that said, we have come to the end of this model. And in the next model, we're going to be looking at design proper, where I'm going to be showing you the interfaces, the tools needed, the workspace, and we're going to be moving straight into creating some simple designs where I'm going to be showing you how some of the principles I showed you plays a major part in creating visual identities and visual elements that work in today's modern world. Until then, see you in the next video.